Hello, and welcome to Sacred Herbalism, the full moon segment of the Elder Tree podcast, where we explore how plants and fungi can support us to enter into a sacred relationship with life and the living world. I'm your host, Stephanie Hazel, herbalist, anthropologist, and a deep lover of this wild world. Let's walk into the moonlit forest together, into a world of magic, mysticism, psychedelic teachers, and, of course, the plants themselves. Are you ready? This full moon, I interview Jacqui Bushell, and the metaphor of the dark forest is particularly apt this month, as just last week I participated in an online class she ran called A Journey into a Dark Wood, where she explored the importance of myth and the inner mythic landscape in culture, history, and psychology. In this class, she made some delicious invitations to engage with the dark forest within, that is a metaphor for transformation, danger, and mystery in so many stories and myths. Hello there, welcome to this month's episode, and this is actually a re-release episode. This is the second interview I ever did on this podcast. We're looking 3 years ago, and I listened to it again recently, and I think I didn't quite realize how special this interview was at the time that I recorded it because I was so new to the game, and re-listening to it really moved me and gave me so much juicy mythic story. I'm actually interviewing Jacqui Bushell, and Jacqui is in many ways an elder of plant listening in Australia. She is a mythologist, a storyteller. She's a spiritual herbalist working with her clients to really create inner transformation, which is a way of working with plants I've really been getting excited about the last few years. She's an incredibly experienced teacher. She's been teaching for more than 30 years. She runs courses and retreats and workshops, and she used to teach in some of the big herbal medicine schools as the faculty there. She's a real breadth of experience. She talks about her work being around exploring our own mythology at the borderlands of psyche, soul, body, landscape mythology, right? How juicy is that? In this conversation, we talk about the many layers of listening that can happen to ourselves, listening to our bodies, listening to the earth, listening to our psyches, listening to the plants. And I really like this image of the many layers of listening. I've been playing with the concepts lately that, when we do plant listening, when we sit with a plant, one layer of that listening is that the plant acts as an archetypal symbol for us to reflect on our own experience of aliveness in a different way. The plant shows us new facets of ourselves and gives us new perspectives on our own psyche, our own lives, much in the way that Jungian psychotherapy will work with figurines or dreams or symbols, right? That's one layer, and it's a really juicy and powerful layer for our own healing. Then there's another layer, whereas listening to the plants with the body, listening to the way that plants move inside us when we ingest them, when we take them regularly, that is a type of noticing that teaches us a lot about the medicine of a plant and about our own body and health. Another layer of listening, even a deeper layer, a relational layer, when we sit with plants, especially with the live plants, and we watch and observe and be with them in our heart, we can really start to see the webs of relationship in the ecosystem around us. And that's where I believe the plants can point us in the right direction to relearning stewardship of land, how to be custodians and guardians, which I think is a special role humans have in the world, right? Then there's an even deeper layer where the plants as embodiments of the river of soul, plants as conscious, aware beings, are living in this kind of other dimension of mythos that we can actually be tapping into through our plant listening. I'm sure there are other layers. They're the ones that I've become aware of over the last 5 years of doing this work, right? But I love that idea of the layers of listening. Jacqui talks about her own experience of having audio brain signal problems, hearing problems, and she had to retrain her senses. And in that way, she learned how much we listen with other parts of us as well. She talks about listening with our bones to plants. And she's an incredible storyteller. So she has all these amazing stories for us to reflect on. Talks about Persephone and the myth of Persephone, her journey to the underworld, and all the plants that supported her coming of age. She talks about Celtic healers and the way that some of the Banshee would use only one plant their whole life as healers. And that story has stayed with me since 3 years ago. I talk about it in nearly all of my teachings because she speaks about a depth of relationship to plants that really blows my mind and shows me what's possible. She talks about the Oracle of Delphi and how the Oracle of Delphi would use mugwort to connect them with the wisdom and the knowledge coming up from the earth. So you're in for a real treat. Give this the time it needs. She's an amazing speaker with so much enthusiasm and a richness of storytelling, which are the kinds of things that lodge in our heart and bubble and bring fertility for many years to come. So if you're new to the podcast, here's a treat for you, and I look forward to seeing you next month. Welcome to this podcast, Jacqui. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for the invitation, Stephanie. It's a delight to be here.
You're most welcome. So I'd like to start with the first question that I always start with, which is, please tell me a story about a time in your life when you began to experience plants as sacred.
Oh, that is just such a gorgeous question. To experience plants as sacred, I mean, that in itself is very rich. What does it actually mean for a plant to be considered sacred as opposed to just alive, opposed to being a friend like the peppercorn tree that I had, who was my best friend as a very nerdy child? I realized the impact that we have on plants a few decades, actually quite a few decades ago, when my first year of teaching essences at Nature Care, and I'd been a herbalist for maybe a decade, and I'd been making essences for a long time as a practice of deeply connecting in with different herbs, with different flowers, or with rocks, and having a sense of them. And I didn't realize the benefit or the level of reciprocity or engagement that actually happened from nature towards me as the essence maker as well. There'd been lots of wonderful stories, but I didn't realize until I had a woman in my class who was desperate to make an essence. They all had to make an essence of a flower as part of their assignment. She was desperate to make an essence of her cactus tree that she'd had for about 30 years growing outside her bedroom, and it was huge. It was about 30 foot tall, something just beyond vast, and it only bloomed twice a year, and it would have one flower at a time, maybe two if she was lucky. So the story went on. I can only make an essence of this, but it's already bloomed. It's twice this year. It won't bloom again till next year. Can I hand in my assignment next year? Can I make an essence in 12 months? It went on. If you need to. Surely there's something else. No, I can't possibly make an essence of anything except my cactus. It was like the pinnacle for her as an essence maker. I'm like, okay, if you're that attached, hand it in a year. And what happened towards the end of the class, it was a 12-week program. She rang me up on a Monday morning and she said, Jack, I don't know what to do. I went away for the weekend. I went away on Friday and I came back on Sunday night, and I went outside this morning, and my cactus tree, that cactus tree that has already bloomed twice this year, that has already had its 2 allotted flowers that it does for every year for the previous 25 years or so, and it's got 26 red flowers on it. 26 flowers or buds. She said, I don't know what to do. Should I make an essence of it? And I was saying, oh my giddy aunt, of course, how dare you not even just It would be terrible if you didn't make an essence of it. This plant, what it's done over in the space of 48 hours, this being has responded to you with every bit of its power, every bit of its love, and has created like an ultimate Christmas gift for you, its beloved human. It made 26 flowers. And she sat and she
Wow.
made an essence with one of those flowers. Oh, and it made me weep to realize that, oh my goodness, 26 flowers in 48 hours. Nature has no concept of the word impossible. Nature responds, and it responds to our intention and our call and to our heart space and to what there is with us. And I realized, oh, I've been seeing plants as something that I engage with rather than something that also engages with me. And I realized as well that I was thinking of them as a something rather than someone.
Mm.
And it brought me into this very different level of, of engagement and realizing that we come together as a dance of reciprocity. And within that dance of reciprocity is the chalice of the sacred, is that reverence for the immensity of that life force and the intelligence.
Mhm. I just got goosebumps from that story. I have to say, like, just yeah, the beautiful act of love and an awareness that that shows from that plant. You know, that cactus tree somehow feeling her desperation for it to flower,
Yes.
and then flowering so prolifically is an incredible, yeah, an incredible gift. You know, and I think as you were saying, when we for there to be reciprocity, we have to feel and know that the plants are actually have intention and agency. Otherwise, if they're just things that are doing their thing and blooming regardless of whatever, according to some biomechanical clockwork that's happening inside them, then it justifies us relating to them in a way of just taking what's
Yes.
there rather than receiving a gift of intention from
Yes.
that
It
plant.
means we're looking at the medicine of the plant rather than the whole plant, where we're not seeing the pattern of its being and its relationships. And we're not, in that way, we're not entering into conversation, which means that we're not also listening for their response. We're not
Mm.
allowing the pause that comes with communion.
Definitely, we talk a lot about like listening to plants and being in conversation with plants in this kind of space. And I'm really curious what that means for you.
Mm.
How do we listen to a plant?
I believe that our notion of listening is really small because we tend to have this idea that we listen with our ears. And as a small digression, I did a very intense 2-year neurological reprogramming training. And because I have an audiospatial um, brain glitch and I literally don't see things, I will miss stuff that's really obvious. And I've learnt that I can't trust my perception. I have to scan carefully to see what there is that's all around me. So I've realized and I've grown up with a sense of what I hear and what I see might be not what other people are hearing and seeing. So I've learnt to always double or triple check what I see and hear. And I realized that through that neurological retraining to balance that, that we also hear through our bones. And I spent 2 years doing bone listening or sharpening the way bones respond to frequency resonance and to be able to bring in a greater balance of what I'm hearing and also that ties in with what I'm seeing. And it taught me so much around how we listen with our whole body, that we listen with our bones, and that our bones hold memory and sound and knowing in a different way from my ears. And when I listen with my blood or my skin, because they're breathing in their own way, then I get different information. And my mood, my emotional state affects what I'm perceiving and hearing as well. So if I'm listening with a plant, then I'll go out at different times, because where I'm at in myself will create filters. And one of the things I realized really early on as well that didn't make sense to me is that most people that I was seeing around me, or that I see on the media, is that most people believe what it is that they see or what they hear, which has been totally turned on its head in COVID, when we
Mm,
realize we can't believe what we see
yeah.
and what we hear, that everything is up for manipulation. And I realize that when we believe what we hear and see, then they become our truth. And they're not, they're just stories. They're just filtered stories. So
Mm,
coming back to your fabulous question, it's a whole body listening through psyche and through intuition and through our senses. Nature communicates through emotion and through smell and touch and
mm,
skin, and the porosity of skin and of our field, and bringing us into, I think it's the Basque people talk about 137 senses that they can easily name, and it's about awakening those senses.
amazing.
137. I haven't managed to work
Yeah,
out what they are yet.
yeah.
I sort of get
Oh, I need that list of them to start working with
sort
that.
of,
That's
yeah,
amazing. Yeah, I love that sense of whole body listening is really interesting to me, and I think that what a gift that your brain glitch has given you, because if you're kind of neurotypical in that way, we are just kind of brought up thinking that what we see as seeing and listening are passive acts, and the truth just arrives inside our head via our
yes,
senses, and we know that's not true. So much neuroscience shows we're so selective with what we see, what we listen, how we interpret things. As an anthropology background that I have, that I really learned to see the cultural lens that I was looking through, and how that actually changed what I was seeing and perceiving and what I was hearing. So I feel like this is actually an amazing gift that you've been given here, to know so deeply that what you hear and see is not everything that
yes.
is there.
Perception is, like you were just saying, it's culturally based. We're taught to see in particular ways. I think as humans, we're steeped in symbol and metaphor, which is why when we speak in story or have stories find us, it immediately taps into that uh, non-linear, wildly spiraling creative part of our brain that taps us straight into the mythic imagination, which
Mm.
taps us straight into the wild. And I really believe, which is why I work with myth and story so much, is
Mm.
that touching them, we can access a doorway, we can cross a threshold into a different level of union, a different way of perceiving and interacting than when we're doing it on in a linear way. So,
Mm.
for example, I have so many students who are learning herbs or who have recently graduated, and they say, "Well, hmm, I've learnt 15 different herbs that are really good for coughs, for expectorating. But how do you know which one to give? Or if I want to help someone get to sleep, do I give valerian or passion flower? Because they all are really good nervines." And
Mm.
it's like you don't know the story of the herb, you don't know the feel of it,
Mhm.
and we know from learning herbalism that you get a list of actions and indications, which could be
Yeah.
anything from cures the sting of vipers through to nervine. And how,
Mhm.
and I stopped teaching herbs in the big colleges when I was told that it was illegal for me to bring herbs in for the students to taste. They couldn't taste the herbs
I'm sorry,
because of
I'm
the
sorry,
danger of it.
that's just
It's like,
ridiculous.
how can you learn
Yeah.
herbs
Talk
without tasting them?
talk about a
Oh,
disembodied, kind of disconnected learning experience.
yes. How can you know the herb unless you can feel it in your body, unless you've uh, have investigated, even if you can't grow it or see it where it's growing, to see 100 pictures or to listen to stories about it
Mm.
or to taste it and to feel how it touches you. Is it warming? Is it stimulating? Does it give you dreams? Does it heat up your belly?
Yeah,
What is
exactly.
this plant actually teaching you?
How is this plant communicating with me through the gateway of my senses, you know? Yeah. And my dreams as well. I'm about to run for a second time in February a 6-week course on plants for mood and mind. I ran it
Mm,
for the first time earlier this year, and mental health is such a challenge for many people in this time. And as a herbalist, I know there are so many plants that I just rely on as my friends to support me to moderate my mood in different ways. So I really
mm.
wanted to share that knowledge, and I was sitting with how do I run an online course in a way that isn't repeating the same issues of disembodiment, disconnection, and just intellectualization of something that is a very physical experience. And
Yes.
so I ran it in a way where every week we did one plant per week. And,
Mm,
and people got a little package with all these bottles of herbs, and they just had number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on them. And the first week, everyone was taking plant 1 for the week and just keeping a diary. How were they feeling? What was different? What were they noticing? What were they dreaming about? How were they sleeping? And then at the beginning of the class, I'd start with a big whiteboard on my Zoom screen, and
mhm,
just write down everyone's observations. And I was quite nervous because I didn't know, these are people who aren't herbalists, who are just members of the public, and I didn't know how that would go. And every week, without fail, without anyone knowing what that plant was, the key themes of that plant's use, the history, the traditional use, the energetics were coming out so clearly. And
mm.
people were having like, oh, I've been dreaming about water this week. And I'm like, oh, me too.
Mhm.
And then it's amazing because after that journey, people were able to identify in an embodied way which plants were actually their allies. It's like,
Yes.
wow, I always read about that plant and thought it wasn't for me, but actually it just felt so good that
Uh-huh.
I'm definitely going to use that plant. Yeah, it was such a beautifully rewarding experience to
Ah, yes.
support people to also trust their own ability to communicate with plants in that way.
Yes. What an amazing teaching that you were inviting them to listen to themselves and to listen to what was arising
Mm.
between them and the plant, and that they
Mm.
could then have the feedback and the confirmation from all the others. I think that's just the greatest gift, and something that I really feel that part of our disconnection from nature is that we're not present to ourselves, and we're
Mm.
not taught to listen and to be tolerant and gracious with our own emotional ups and downs, our own internal cycles, and to stay present in here. And if we can't do this, then how can we have rich and deep conversations with other than human realms, or
Mm.
relate with the with nature?
That's a really good question. And we're so disconnected from our own bodies that our body is part of nature. In fact, our body is our gateway into nature. And so if we're not present to the gateway, how do you walk through it? Or, yeah, I think that's a really beautiful image. Thank you for that.
Actually, it was interesting. What's also just coming to mind as well is in the Celtic cosmology, uh, in the giving of a herb, then it would always be given with a charm or an incantation or a ritual, because the herb wouldn't work
Mm.
if it was just given in the 3D, here, take this 3 times a day. There had to be engagement from the person, and the person would have to sing that song of the
Mm.
plant, or rub it 3 times and shine it in the moon, or whatever it might be, or to use particular language, because the Celts believed that poetry was the gateway to the gods, that poetry was so
Mm.
powerful, the words that you use can shape the world. So that in the words that you use, you're inviting in the engagement. You're not actually activating the plant, you're activating yourself so that the plant can then engage with you. You're crossing that realm. So there was that potency of your own
Mm.
presence, as well as you would also need to give what they called I guess in Anglo-Saxon terms, was a kenning. It was a coming up with another name for the herb, praise words. "O beauteous mother of herbs, mugwort, Una, queen of the bears, you are so potent, you are so strong, you are a sword of courage and strength." You would have to sing up the herb, not just say, "Okay, I'm going to take my mugwort now." What is it? 6 drops, 7 drops? Okay, 6 drops. Then you'd have to engage with it and find a way of describing it and bring in the magic of the words to open the gateway into the other world. And then the herb could go, "Yeah, all right. Okay, yep, sure. Here I am. Here's the magic."
Amazing. I wonder, do you know if they were the same songs and words and incantations that were like that were each time that someone was given mugwort,
Yes.
this was the song to sing for
Yes.
mugwort?
Yes, because in, for example, with the Banfassa or the fairy woman, the woman who knew, and they often were women who knew, uh, or the banshee, which we sort of has been translated into the banshee, which is screaming woman, but basically what it literally translates as is the fairy woman, or the woman of the shining ones, the woman who can bridge the world and bring back the knowing that is required. And there might be something very particular for you to say or do in order to activate that combination of herbs for you. But for a particular herb, you would have a particular cunning woman. So you would have a family heritage of, we hold the charm and the song that the fairy realm, the she, the shining ones have given us for this particular liver herb remedy. And another family would have the remedies for sleep or baby making. So you would go to the cunning woman who held that law. That was her business, and the fairy spoke with her. The banshee down the road wouldn't be able to get that same knowledge, or if she tried to nick it, she wouldn't have the key to open the gateway properly with that particular plant. And it was very specific. So actually, it was interesting. I was visiting a few years ago a friend of mine, Isabel, Is Gilman, who's a wonderful sounding woman, and she's got an incredible garden. And we were talking right next to one of her huge foxglove flowers. And we're chatting away and weeding, and she starts singing. And I'm listening to this song she's singing. And there's foxglove. It was about 5 foot tall and those great bells of flowers. And she was singing the song of foxglove. It was so clear. I could hear the foxglove in the song. And I said, "You're singing it." And she says, "Oh, yes." She's French. "Oh, yes, that is the song of foxglove." And it was like, "Yes, of course it is.
Wow.
If I ever heard that song anywhere, I would know it was foxglove."
And where did she learn that song?
She just sang it because that was the song that the plant was singing as she was standing
Mm,
next to it, the song of its
beautiful.
pattern of consciousness into the world. And other people might
Yeah.
paint that pattern of consciousness. And I listen
Mm,
to it amplified in bowls of water and make an essence. Or for you, it
mhm.
might be a feeling state or a color or a smell or a sound. And for her, because she's so musical, it was a song.
The many facets of listening, huh?
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm.
beautiful. Oh, I'm really moved by that, by the story of the Celtic, cunning banshees and all of the different laws and stories and songs they have for those plants. And it really makes me feel the great loss of dislocation and displacement as a white European person living in Australia. And I love my home. I love Australia, and it's such a rich, mythic, cultural, and aesthetic landscape. And yet, there's something so incredibly powerful in being so embedded in a place as a plant worker where you know the plants. You don't just know what the plants are. Like when I go to Switzerland, where I was born, I really have that experience of walking through the mountains. I'm like, oh, there's yarrow. Oh, there's herb robert. Oh, there's valerian. Oh, there's gentian. And the plants I know are everywhere. It's this really beautiful feeling.
Yes.
And I know my ancestors have walked that land and collected those plants. My great grandfather used to do that every weekend. Apparently, wander the landscape and ask the peasants. He was more of an educated kind of teacher person. Asked the peasants about what plants they knew, and he kept them all written down in a book and collected all the stories.
Mm.
But still, what you're talking about there in an older era of this not just recognizing the plants, knowing their Latin name and what they can be used for biochemically, but really knowing them to the point where you know the special song that they sing, you know the incantation that they need, you know, like the myths and stories that really speak to the unconscious around how those plants work and what transformative journey they're doing. It just sounds like such an incredibly deep form of knowledge. And I wonder what kind of healing could be possible with that information.
Yes. One of the other interesting things with the Celtic peoples was what it was essentially based on, their core philosophy, their core belief that is enshrined in the Brecon laws or their system of justice is balance. Their justice system wasn't based on retribution, wasn't based on punishment. You've done wrong, you're going to be locked up. It was based on, okay, you've done wrong. You've stolen that person's cow. How are you going to make balance with this? How are you going to make it right with the community, with the land, with the cow, with everything? So it totally turns our system on its head. How do we make restitution? And that
Mm,
is because they were accountable to the land. And it really brings on questions for me of how am I living in accountability with the land here? What is my sense of balance? How,
mm,
and in order to have that deeper sense of balance, I must I need to develop a great sense of relationship with nature, because nature doesn't operate on free will in the way that humans do. Nature only operates with inherent balance. So
mm,
in how do we come into that level of rapport or co-conversations in order to be able to have a sense of, okay, how do we live in balance here? And one of the things that I don't think we've got time today to address, but I just want to acknowledge it as one of the richest questions for us of a European background. We're essentially migrants, either in Australia or wherever we've travelled, because we have moved through so many countries. We've travelled as much as Ribward has throughout the world. And how do we live within displacement on lands where the bones of our ancestors do not lie, on a land where we don't know the stories of this land because we're not Indigenous, and yet our heart and our breath and our body resonates with love for the
mm.
land that we're born on. And
And as well, when we take into account the fact that we are porous and completely entangled with the
yes,
environments in which we find ourselves, we
yes,
are also made of the land. Like the cells of our body and the soil in my garden is also the microbes that are in my own belly, and the water of my blood has fallen on this earth from the rain. Like I am so built of this earth as well,
yes,
this land here.
yes. We're anchored in our own belonging here, and for our psyche to find the same level of belonging
Mm.
as our blood and as our breath, and to root
Yeah.
here and to find a way for our stories to find root. I
Mm.
over one of those pandemania years, I was in Victoria for quite a few months, living by myself. I couldn't get back home, and I was living by a river, and I was living within a number of mythic stories that were essentially Celtic in origin. And I came against a wall of, I don't feel I can tell these stories to the land here. I've only been here a few months. It's not my land, and it's Australia. And I really sat with, how do I sit with the stories that are resonating with me from Scottish and Irish heritage? And how do I live into them here? Am I creating dissonance on the land? I don't know the Aboriginal stories, and it wouldn't be my right to tell them anyway. So I asked the trees and I asked the river, and they said, well, are you not you? And are you not here? Your stories are you. So basically, what's the problem? if you are here and you are embraced in this land, because you cannot not be embraced by the land because you are here. Like every footfall of yours is a
Mm.
touch on this land, and the land rises to meet you in this place. Everything that your eyes alight on, you are being received by the land, because he can't see anything without receiving and being received in return. And your stories, your blood, your bones, your breath, your history, your ancestry is part of you in this holographic moment. Tell your story. And
Mm.
I told the story of Rhiannon to the river and to the tree and to the bees and to the blackbird who sat on top of the conifer every morning at 7 a.m. And I felt the story that was singing in me being held by the land, this Celtic story. And I think I wept for about a month at feeling all of me being held
Mm.
within a communion, that there was space for all that I am. There was no rejection. And I've really learnt from that immense level of how we are received in every moment, and how we
Mm.
can never ever be outside of belonging.
Yeah, that for me is just such a key thing that, my experience of plants and by extension the living world as sacred, that's the gift I've really received, I think, over these last years of really working with that concept. When I can really connect with my sense of
Mm,
being so entangled and supported by
yeah,
all of these living beings around me,
yeah,
by the trees that are making oxygen for my breath, and the all the plants that I am consuming as food and as medicines, and this kind of entangled relationship with the living world. How can I feel like I don't belong? How can I feel lonely and isolated when by I can't be alive if I'm isolated,
yes.
Yeah. So I want to talk a bit about your work as a mythologist, as a myth worker, a
Yes.
storyteller. And I had the great privilege to come last Friday to a webinar you were running, a journey into the dark woods, where you spoke a lot about this mythic forest that lives in the unconscious, in the dream, the dreamscape of humanity, and that's a place where all these myths about transformation take place. And I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for having me along. I hope I have the pleasure of working more deeply with you on some of your myth work. I think it's really exciting. I was so inspired afterwards. And I have some questions about how your work as a mythologist and as a herbalist intersect.
I know, and I've learned in my body, in my bones, that stories, that myths, the old stories are alive, that they sniff us out like a wolf in the forest and find us, and can live through us, that they give us a framework of experience, a framework to explore ourself personally and to explore our world. It doesn't make sense for me to say they are alive, they are like animals, they are like creatures. There's maybe if I put it in archetypal terms, but there's a quality in them because they come from the other world. They're not just stories that people make up. The old myths, these ancient stories, these so-called fairy tales that have
Mm.
flown over the tongues of so many people, like a river flowing over stones that have smoothed themselves out over centuries of use. There's this honing of stories and shifting and adapting to different cultures and essential elements that stay the same through them all. And these stories have weathered time. They're as old as mountains, and they come from the land. They come. I I believe that rocks and plants and great trees and birds and the winds hold stories. They hold metaphors, and they hold that which they are, the power of that which they are. And one way for us to understand what it is they are in the world is through metaphor, is through story, through myth. And when we share stories or when we tell myths, we come into greater alignment with nature, with the
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing there when you're talking about the way that the eagles and the landscape, they all have these metaphors embedded in them, and when we know these myths that come through, the more imaginal realm, then we can understand the deep essence of that being in a different way. So I imagine
Yes.
that if I was to know the myth and the story of mugwort, perhaps I would understand what the essence of their transformation is that they're offering us as medicines.
Yes, it brings us into a different level of rapport. It's a communication of the spirit or the pattern of of consciousness, or maybe you could talk about the devic realm uh,
Mm.
with us, so we can understand them. Because often what we do as herbalists, how we're taught, is to to learn by rote particular things. So when we can step into the mystery of it, into the 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 mythic, the mythos of the plant, then there's a communion psyche to psyche and heart to heart,
Mm.
and we feel the pattern of it in our being. It
Mm.
it enables us to have a spiritual understanding. It enables us to connect with the I'll just say maybe the bigger pattern of what it is and what it offers
Mm.
in the world. One of the things I often tell my students is imagine what the world would be like if we didn't have mugwort. What would be missing if mugwort didn't
Mm.
exist? What would not happen? What would exist if we didn't have wheat here? Or what would be gone? And that
Yeah.
relationship that
Mm.
humanity has had with wheat over millennia, for instance, or
And all the things that wheat represents, like
absolutely.
the way that wheat represents bread and
Yes,
sustenance, and also colonialism, and this kind of many facets. I'm
absolutely.
kind of hearing, like, when you're talking about that, I feel the way we tend to look at plants is through the scientific lens of the magnifying glass, trying to look at the smallest details.
Yes.
And through finding the smallest details, the different biochemical constituents and what they look like and how they work, then we'll really know and we'll understand it. And what I'm hearing is that myth can give us almost the opposite. It's like a minimizing glass that lets us step right back and see kind of the broad themes and patterns that that plant and how it interacts with humans is
Yes.
producing.
Myths bridge paradox, bridge opposites, and that's a lot of what our herbs do. While we can be very clear about the constituents, sometimes it doesn't make sense. We still don't know how shepherd's purse stops bleeding. Uh, it doesn't make sense. Or other
Mm.
herbs like fumitree, it might stimulate the gallbladder or it might reduce the function of it. It just depends on what's happening in your body. I mean, how does it know how to do that? There's an immense uh, we're engaging with a level of intelligence that is beyond the logic realm. And our
Mm.
scientific realm is starting to help us understand a little bit more through scientists like Suzanne Simard and Monica Gagliano and those incredible people doing wonderful work of bridging spirit and science and plant communication. Uh, it's also up to us to choose to open into those conversations, to be able to um, sense the feel of it within us if we put some on our tongue and taste it.
I want to circle back to this idea of myths and myths. When we know the myths or we apply a mythological lens to different plants, it allows us to access a different part of that plant's teaching and medicine. And I'm just curious if you know any myths, and being a storyteller and a story holder, do you know any myths that speak about specific plants and kind of tell
Mm.
some of their story?
Oh, there's so many. There's a lot of Greek myths. And what I often like to do is to draw out an aspect of a particular myth. I mean, we can talk about the role of Narcissus in the journey of Persephone into the underworld, where she was so taken by the allure of this beautiful flower that she followed it. And you know what it's like when you're following a trail of flowers, a flower that you've never seen before in the woods or the meadow somewhere. It's like, oh my goodness, and there's another and another and another. And before she knew it, she tumbled down a cleft and into the underworld, where initially she was so shocked. She'd never met death. She had never met darkness, the like of which was impossible to imagine. She'd never met the river of suffering before. And how is this maiden who was dancing with flowers, who just followed this pretty little thing, how is she to make sense of all of that? And she stayed down there, initially just horrified and so overwhelmed. You imagine this empathic young woman just overloaded by suffering. And so her aunt Hecate taught her, and taught her how to row across the river of suffering. And she was so moved by compassion
Mm.
that she found the strength in herself to be able to stay present and offer solace to all of the dead, and to offer them the gift of regeneration and resurrection, and to find new ways of being. So much so that one of my favorite parts of the Persephone myth is, and this is an old version because the Greeks changed things so much. I often like to track, maybe like you as an anthropologist, you track the stories throughout the ages. And because each myth is taken by a culture and shaped to reinforce the status quo, or else to create revolution in some way. And Persephone, what she did was that
Mm.
she made the choice to, when her mother said, if you really loved me as I love you, beloved daughter, you would come back up here. You would be with me. You have to come. You have to come now. And she said, whoa. And Hecate said, no, this is your job. You are now a sovereign queen down here. You are queen of the underworld. What the hell are you thinking of going back to your mother? You're a queen, for heaven's sake. This is your place. And she said, whoa, hang on, hold on. And withdrew and made her own choice. And it's a story of coming into autonomy and sovereignty. And she chose to take the medicine of pomegranate, this lush, sensual, sexy plant, and sipped on the nectar of it and ate 6 seeds. And I'm just imagining what that must have felt like, so that she made the choice of resurrection, life up here, and full playfulness and dancing, and life here, sovereign queen. And that story of autonomy and the place of the pomegranate in that level of choice. Pomegranate that represents such immense, sexy kind of fertility. And also, it is also a fruit that brings, it's a contraceptive agent. So it's a fruit of sterility as
Mm.
well as abundance. And I love how that story bridges both those opposites and brings it together.
The dichotomy between the sexy, fertile, abundant, juicy, bloody pomegranate and it being contraceptive, that's also for me, it's not just sterility, but it's also female sexual freedom.
Hmm.
And so then what is Persephone learning? What is that pomegranate representing? In a way, it's that like tasting the fruits of her own sexual empowerment, which is always a break from the mother and the maiden and the child.
Yes. Yes, it's a great perspective.
Mhm.
Uh, I love that she actually chose a pomegranate. She didn't pick a mushroom. She didn't pick, uh, a grape or an olive. She picked a pomegranate.
Mm.
There's such a lushness to that, and of her going aside and, okay, mother, queen, where am I in this? Here, I
Mm.
stand. I make my choice.
So drawing back to the narcissus, do you like what do you think that tells us about the flower narcissus as a flower essence, as a medicine? Is it even used in medicine, narcissus?
Not that I know of, actually. I've never made an essence of it, but we know that it was that handsome Narcissus fella who fell in love with himself who was turned into the flower, and it was that flower. Uh, in that regard of leading her into the underworld because it was so stunningly beautiful. And maybe it was also something that I that flower just didn't pop up by itself. There was a calling, and I believe that there was the calling because it was time in Persephone. It was time she was Kore, the maiden, and she needed to come into another role. So it was something calling within her, and also her destiny was calling
Mm.
her as well. So there was that from within the earth that was calling her. Because one of the other things that I've really noticed, and maybe you have as well with growing plants or seeing what's growing around you, is what it is that we need can suddenly appear. And I've seen that so often where, for example, Centauri, where I was living in the Blue Mountains outside of Sydney, I had never seen Centauri grow in there in 10 years anywhere in the area. And then all of a sudden, one summer, phew, Centauri was everywhere. And so I made an essence, of course, and
Yeah, I definitely had that.
other things you've had that.
Yeah, I remember. I think the
Yeah.
first time it occurred to me was when I was living in Argentina when I was 21 and just starting to get quite interested in plants. And I'd never been anywhere where everyone looked so liverish to me. I was in a fairly poor part of Buenos Aires, so it was people were you drink a lot of alcohol, a lot of fried food, a lot of sugar, a lot of meat, and there was just I've dandelion everywhere, just everywhere, And I've been thinking actually more deeply on this lately because my garden is like a shrine to calendula. Once a few years ago, I sowed a small handful of happy bug seeds, of which a few calendula seeds were in there. That was 2 years ago, and I have not planted a single calendula since then. And yet, still now at this time, the end of spring, beginning of summer, there must be like I don't know 300 calendula plants, and I've been pulling them out to make room for the
Glorious.
other plants, and then
Mm.
there's like 25 new baby calendula plants in every spot that I've pulled one out. I've been really thinking about this, being like, wow, calendula, hey? I've got to think,
Mhm.
like, what's the medicine there? And feeling there must be some kind of indication or communication from that plant that it would be really good for us in the house to um, take some calendula. So I've been thinking about that from a kind of, I guess, mythopoetic lens, like the spirit of the plant reaching out and being like, hey, I'm here, I'm your friend, you should listen. And I've also
Mm.
been thinking about that using a systems thinking lens, which is something I've been, I used to work for about 8 years in public health and doing kind of program design in public health. And the last few years, we were looking at systems thinking approaches to understand health as a very multifaceted, complex situation. So I've been thinking a lot about that. And where I landed with this calendula thought experiment is that whether or not I want to ascribe a kind of sentience and like the spirit of the plant talking to me, there's still that plant is living in the same environment as me. There's a lot of water that's trapped under the house. It's quite damp. There's like, certain kinds of microbes in the soil, and the air is a certain quality. And for whatever reason, this plant is growing up, thriving in my garden with its incredible plant chemistry intelligence. It's able to thrive because it's making the right chemicals to thrive in this environment, and it's responding to the environment it lives in a way that I can't. I just don't have that kind of chemical, intelligence. Plants are just
Mm.
master chemists.
Yes.
And from that perspective alone, there's this feeling for me that this plant has learnt how to respond to this environment and thrive. I'm also in this environment. I could connect more with this plant and it could teach me either through teas, either through sitting with the plant, making a tincture, but I could learn how to adapt and thrive in this very small place I live, this garden, just like the
Yes.
calendula is.
Yes. I love what you've really brought out there of there's so many things that because you are in relationship with calendula because it's growing there so well, and there's so many things that you could draw out from it. You could say, okay, I need to bring in sunshine into the house because calendula is just pure sunshine in matter. It's just this glorious bright sun bright herb. So it could be that there's so many facets, but I'm loving hearing, okay, there's a thriving quality that's here. You're looking at the environment and how it's adjusting. So there's something that is already dancing in conversation between you and that plant of, hmm, your quality of adaptability and resilience. How can I imbibe of that in my
Yeah.
being, in our family being, for the house itself? How can the house thrive when its own roots, its foundations are damp? And how do we bring that in? Because calendula does dry up dampness. It does bring in sunshine in dark
Mhm.
places.
Yeah.
So I love hearing how you've actually taken the quality, a particular quality of the plant,
Mm.
and inviting it to deepen in your own being. That's
And I
just
really
true plant spirit work.
thank you. Yeah, and I really do love this exploration of, I have a very rationally minded partner
Mhm.
who's a brilliant mediator and communications teacher, and very different world from me. And I love the way that, because of how he makes sense of the world, I'm always challenged by him to find the stories that are both mythopoetic, spiritual, that is more my natural inclination, and that's also rationalist, and
Mm.
to explain the same things, and that there
Yes.
is a point, a place where you can use systems thinking, scientific perspectives to explain something, that you can also use mythopoetic language. This
Yes.
plant is growing in my garden because it knows that I need help. I could make it that simple, and I
Hmm.
can make it as complex as it's like adaptive chemical intelligence responding to the environment it finds itself in. And they're the
Mm.
same thing. I'm talking about the same thing. And so that's
Yes.
become it's become a little joy of mine, is to find rationalist explanations that make sense to him for
Hmm.
the things that I know to be true in a deeper part of myself.
Yes. Yes. You're creating bridges. Mm.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And isn't that just the key to what is so needed now? How to find a language to communicate that level of conversation or relationship in a way that it can be heard by another person and make sense to them, to their perception,
Mm.
and therefore extend their world in some way or bring them into relationship, bring your darling into relationship with calendula. So we're not going to create bridges with all of humanity and nature through butting up against them, but by finding this
Definitely.
language of communion, of
Mm.
bridging all of these
Mm.
realms.
Do you know any stories about calendula?
Oh, calendula.
I'm really getting you to rifle through the annals of your prodigious plant knowledge.
Oh, you know, actually, I can't think of a particular calendula story. I just have this, I just adore calendula. It's just one of my, you know how there's some best friends in herbs that you have?
Mhm.
And I just smile because calendula is like one of those friends where you don't need to say anything to each other and you might not have seen each other for years, but you can just sit down together and you just love each other because calendula, oh, one of the things that we do, slight digression, with stories is that when we look for stories in the landscape, it brings us into a deeper level of listening so that we notice things more. And when we try and find language for it, it means that we're actually doing a deep level of reflection and acknowledgement. So creating stories and telling stories is so much about dropping into the environment and allowing the the landscape to drop into and be embodied within you as well. I think it's stories are really important on that
Mm.
level as well to generate the engagement. And I just always have this felt sense of the warmth of calendula. They're called Oculus Christi, the eye of Christ, because it just shines light out into the world and it
Mm.
draws all the light into itself. I mean, when you go out first thing in the morning, all of the Californian poppies in spring will be totally closed till about 11 a.m. And then they'll just, oh, is it hot enough? No. Okay, I'll stay closed today. They're like a supermodel. It's like, oh no, can't do it. If it's sunny enough, yeah, I'll open. Oh yeah. And, and then they'll close. Oh, no, forget it. I'm staying close. No, forget it. I'm not being paid $10,000. No. And calendar will be, they're like a dog. They're like, yay, it's 4 a.m. That's almost the sun. Okay, another hour. That's okay. I'll be awake anyway. Hi. Oh, yes. Okay, where are you now? Okay, I'll turn this way. And oh, no, I'll turn this way. There you are, darling. I love you. And they just sing at the top of their voices this joy of being. And then they'll wait. Okay, it's sunset. Oh, that's all right. I'll just stay open. Okay, it's dark. Is it really dark? You're not coming out again? Oh, okay. All right. Oh, okay. Yes. And just that infinite sweetness of joy, of present, of showing up. I have never ever met a flower that says, bad hair day. Oh no, I'm doing shame. No, just don't talk to me today. There's just this entirety of their being. They just show with everything that they are. I mean, what a teaching for us in stepping into the abundance of our being, no matter what is happening for us, that we can still have the choice of resting in the authentic grace, the loving grace of our being. And that's what calendula teaches us here. You can receive the light of the grace of all being in every moment. All you need to do is choose to turn your head to face in that direction. It's a choice.
I'm curious if there's a particular plant at the moment that, or, it could be right now or throughout your life, a plant you feel really connected to. Maybe a story you could tell me about that plant.
Oh, mugwort has burst into my life over the last year. It has come in and it has claimed me. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't expecting it at all. And it suddenly arrived. And has become one of my key plant teachers. I've been sitting with it, drinking it. I've been prompted, shoved really, into running mugwort initiation circles with groups. I just did another one a couple of days ago of taking women into the dreaming that is offered through mugwort, because it does activate dreaming so much. And its stories all relate to, well, it's called the mother of herbs, or Una, or the great bear, because bears hibernate, and in their hibernation, they're like Sleeping Beauty. They're dreaming really deeply. And in that dreaming place, we can access any realm. We can access ancestors. We can access star beings. We can access visions and medicine and wisdom and questions, because I really believe that it's the questions that will be most important for us in these times of change now, rather than the answers, because answers just narrow things down, but questions can make things really big. So mugwort has become the herb of, what question should I ask? How can I open and change my whole way of being and seeing and listening? And one of the histories of mugwort, the mother herb, it was considered to be one of the first herbs ever, the mother of all herbs that gave rise to all of the other medicines. And it's a plant that, as you probably know well, induces very strong dreaming. And it's very interesting because it's also considered to be the flying herb, the herb that women would rub on their broomstick so that they could fly, which I think is a real metaphor for the taking of the herb and flying through consciousness. And it's also a herb that we know is an emmenagogue, and it will bring on your bleeding, and it will help with cramps, and it also warms and activates the belly, the solar plexus, and the womb. So one of the curious things about it is that we work with it as a herb to open our consciousness, and yet at the same time drop us deep into the core of our being. And a tradition of this herb is, if we go back to the days of the oracles of Delphi, the great Pythias, or the black doves, the prophetesses at Dodona. There's links with all of them to the seven sisters, to the Pleiades, and that they came down and taught humanity their greatest gifts, and that when they returned to the stars, that certain oracles could take certain herbs as plant entheogens, and they could connect with the sisters and bring information through from them. And they could also, because mugwort takes you down, they would channel the earth, they would channel Gaia, the great mother. It was only later in Greek times when Zeus came in and Apollo came in and killed the women and killed the great python, the great dragon that guarded the portals to the other world. And then Apollo trained up oracles who would channel him rather than the earth. But before those Apollonian times, those Zeusian times of patriarchy came in, the women, they would sit over, there's often stories like in Delphi of sitting over a cleft in the earth and fumes would come up. And there's this one fabulous story from a horrified Christian monk, and he was so aghast at what he saw that it must be true. And he said that they would sit over a chair that had a hole in a bottom and they would expose their genitalia. And it was like a yoni steam that would come up, thinking, wow, what a great story. So they would sit there and this steam, this sulfurous steam would rise up, and herbs over charcoal of mugwort, the dreaming herb, up through their body, warming their womb, which then warms and softens and opens their heart, which then warms and opens their tongue. And then with their skills, they would bring in the wisdom of the earth and speak it. So there's that root of them connecting with the dragon of the earth and connecting with that wisdom and speaking truth. And they were known to be so accurate that the word of a priestess of Delphi was absolute law. They never ever lied or deceived. They only could speak truth. And theirs was law above an emperor because of that accuracy of their being. So I think of those women, sitting there,
Steaming.
in the fullness of themselves, listening to the songs of the earth, mediated by this rich herb, which I happen to have some here, of course, of mugwort.
Thank you for that. That was transporting. And Margaret has been one of my close herbal friends for a long
Yeah, me
time, and
too.
I think
Oh,
that's a really beautiful place for us to, start ending our journey here today. It's such a beautiful example of how myth and story and history just enriches our understanding of a plant. I don't think anyone who heard that story will forget that about mugwort. So thank you.
it's been such a pleasure to connect with you and to share this conversation. Thank you, and dream well. And
Thank you.
and for everyone, just enjoy listening to the stories of the land and telling your stories to the land.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening to this full moon's episode of Sacred Herbalism. I just loved how rich and descriptive all those stories were. And if you'd like to know more about Jacqui's work, you can find her website link and her Facebook link in the show notes. You'll also find the link to a free meditation from Jacqui on plant spirits and the Council of Trees. If you want to learn how to do plant listening yourself in a really carefully held intimate container and reclaim your lost capacity to learn directly from plants through sensory and intuitive intelligence, then I would really love to invite you to apply for Wild Age of Herbalism. I'm now taking applications for a small group of people to be journeying in person and online with plants as teachers and guides. You can go to my website, stephaniehazel.com.au, and the link is in the show notes. That's us for this moon cycle. I'm so glad you walked into the dark forest with me. This podcast is part of The Elder Tree, a non-profit dedicated to empowering people through grassroots herbal education, weaving a strong community of herbalists, healers, and plant folk in Australia. You can head over to theeldertree.org to find out more. If you like this episode, we'd love you to subscribe. And if you know who we should interview next, drop us a line. See you next month. And in the meantime, may you be blessed with good health and many plants.